Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing RTX 30 stuff actually. There is so much Nvidia news today, thanks to a mixture of leaks and official confirmation from Nvidia, that I just decided to release a video specifically focused on them. After all, the official reveal of the cards is not too long into the future now, and so information for these cards is starting to come thick and fast. There'll also be a second video which will focus on tons of PlayStation 5 information as well as some Xbox Series X stuff too. And I'd like to begin with a rumour from videocards.com. Typically speaking, video cards have a really good track record, and they generally only post if they're incredibly certain of the information that they are fed. And in this instance, YCry, who is the owner of videocards.com, has actually confirmed that there will not be a 3080 Ti at launch. Instead, Nvidia will be launching the 3090, the 3080, and probably the 3070. And this information marries up very well to what we've heard in the past, but it seems like we're going to be seeing the 3090 with 24GB, this has been confirmed, and the 3080 does seem to be confirmed now at 10GB. So this is what basically the AIBs, are actually manufacturing as we speak. So essentially it looks like Nvidia have locked in the memory configurations, and we can imagine that there will be GPUs and variants which will sit in between this. So for example, there could be a 3070 Ti or Super, or a 3080 Ti or Super, which of course will have a different memory configuration. Maybe it will have 20GB of memory, or I don't know, 16GB of memory, or whatever. And that would of course mean that we see a kind of a card that would be between the 3090 and 3080, since there is supposed to be such a big difference in price. $800 versus, once again, $1,400. I'm pretty sure we can agree that that's quite a gap. And moving, however, to official confirmation from Nvidia, this is going to be kind of jumping around a little bit. Nvidia have actually plonked on their channel the official Nvidia GeForce channel, not the Nvidia channel by itself as far as I know, a video by the name of The Remarkable Art and Science of Modern Graphics Card Design. It's not too long, I'll link it in the description of this video, and if you are someone who gets a kick out of this stuff, well, I suggest you go ahead and give it a watch. But the too long didn't read is that this video actually confirms quite a lot of stuff. The first thing is that the 12-pin power connector is apparently confirmed. This has been rumoured for a while, and honestly, I will hold my hand up, I didn't believe it. But no, Nvidia are doing it. And it seems like the reason behind this is that the new configuration saves space, but also, of course, is able to deliver a lot more power. In the image that you can see, it also states that it's compact 12-pin connector. It is compatible with PCIe 8-pin cables. So if you have a decent PSU right now, assuming it's able to deliver the amperage, you get it, I'm sorry, that was terrible. But if you are able to deliver the power that your GPU needs, you will be good to go. So if you have, let's say, an 850 watt PSU right now from a reputable manufacturer, then you should be okay. It's not like you're going to need to throw out your power supply and go with something entirely different. I'm okay with this. It will be interesting to see how long it takes, or rather the availability for PSUs which actually have the 12-pin power connector. But either way, the video also confirms something else, and that is that the GPU's PCB is not a regular shape. It's not like a, kind of a rectangle or something else. It's irregularly shaped. This, honestly, from our perspective as a consumer, doesn't necessarily mean a whole huge amount, but it does also provide a couple of smaller glimpses to the GPU's design, as well as the movement of air through the fans and obviously the cooling solution of the GPU. I think it's pretty clear that Nvidia are really pushing that this card is going to be, I don't know how to describe it other than an evolution, a step forward for GPUs. There was a lot of speculation that Ampere was, but this is of course even before official information got released of Ampere, that Ampere was basically Turing with higher clock frequencies and maybe better ray tracing, and of course, additional CUDA cores and maybe changes in memory configuration or whatever. But it doesn't seem like that, and Nvidia seem to be pushing this GPU as additional features as well. And recently, Jensen Huang also commented, I believe it was in an investor meeting, that they're going to continue to double down on RTX features. Does that mean that Nvidia are going to outperform AMD? Honestly, I don't know. I am super curious, though, to see how all of this plays out, especially in light of yet further information. And this is from Teases Kimi. And Teases Kimi has actually posted performance results of TSE, which stands for Time Spy Extreme. Before we go into the performance numbers, I just want to spend a second to point something out. Time Spy Extreme is only one branch of code, and it's not necessarily indicative of what you would get for running any other benchmark, or for that matter, of course, more importantly for I suspect most of you, games. So we may not see these performance uplifts that I'm about to go through in games, but if we're even slightly close to these performance results, I believe the best way of describing it is, oh my, these be impressive. So we're looking at the 3090 Founders Edition, and of course, it goes without saying, Founders Edition, different clock frequencies. We're only, or he's only, or whatever, referring to the standard, base Founders Edition frequencies here. The 3090 is around the 10,000 point mark. The last couple of numbers were X'd out. The Quadro is 9,300 points, and then the 3080 Founders Edition is about 8,500 points. Now, I know what you're going to say, well, gee golly, how fast is a 2080 Ti in comparison? Well, basically, a Founders Edition 2080 Ti scores roughly in the region of 6,400 points. This is, once again, for a 2080 Ti Founders Edition, around 6,400 points. You can overclock it, tweak it, and maybe get a little bit more, but, bog standard, without touching any of the configuration or messing around with overclocking, it scores around 6,400 points. So essentially, we're looking at just over 2,000 points higher for the 3080 Founders Edition over the 2080 Ti. And the 2080 Founders Edition is 5,000 points. So that's pretty profound. It basically means, if you do the maths, that the 3080 is roughly 70% faster than the 2080, which I think is a pretty damn impressive leap. The thing is, I would be very curious how this is performing in terms of games, because if these numbers are accurate, and I stress the word if, this would theoretically mean that we could run a game at 4K, even over 100 FPS. Shadow of the Tomb Raider roughly scores 4K 60 FPS on a 2080 Ti on my Gigabyte model. It's a reference design, and that's with no overclocking and without hardware-based ray tracing. If you enable hardware-based ray tracing, of course, frame rate tanks, but then you could enable DLSS. We're not talking about that, native resolution only. So if this does score around 100-ish frames a second to 110 frames a second, I understand, and I'm not justifying the price, but I understand why Nvidia are charging this amount of cash for the Founders Edition. Now, one thing that you might notice is that the 3080 Founders Edition to the 3090, it's only about 1,500 points difference, which isn't a small amount, but it's also maybe not quite as big of a gap given the difference in the number of CUDA cores which are rumoured. If I had to guess, some of this is simply because of, clock frequency. I suspect that the 3080, like we saw with the 2080 Ti versus the 2080, I'm guessing that the 3080 has higher clock frequencies, and also when you have loads of additional SMs, sometimes they are idle, so it might be also scheduling related. It could also be early drivers. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if these numbers are not necessarily what we get when the GPU gets into the hands of the reviewers. So maybe we see slightly higher numbers of this for times by extreme. I'm not saying we will. I don't have any inside information to what the state of Nvidia's drivers are for Ampere. Another problem is we don't know whether all of these benchmarks for the 30 series were conducted using the same system. We have no idea what the CPU is. We have no idea of, let's say, memory speeds. For all we know, these are done on like an 8700K with default clocks. Then again, it could also be done on like a 10900K or a 3950X or something like that, heavily overclocked. We just don't know this. I am really hyped for Nvidia's launch. I must say, I'm really excited to see what Nvidia actually bring to the table for the next generation. With the 3090 featuring 5248 CUDA cores, and that's 82 SM, assuming that number's accurate, compare that to the 4352 of the 3080. I honestly suspect that these numbers are not too far off. I'm, however, extremely interested at this point in things such as hardware-based ray tracing. I know in some people's eyes, hardware-based ray tracing got kind of a bad rap, and I understand that. Software support, honestly, was really slow to take off for hardware-based ray tracing, and it's also very expensive to run. However, I kind of feel that Nvidia were playing the long game here. They knew it would take a long time for developers to really get into it, and they also knew that technology like DLSS is probably going to be the future. I still believe there's a very good likelihood that AMD will have some upsampling tech on RDNA 2. I think it's going to be lower precision operations, much like we're seeing with the Xbox, because it's just needed, quite frankly. Just in terms of feature set, comparable feature sets are incredibly important. Just like Nvidia had, of course, ray tracing with Turing, and now naturally it's going to improve with Ampere. I suspect that AMD knew that the market was heading towards hardware-based ray tracing. Obviously, the console manufacturers wanted hardware-based ray tracing, but also developers too. And so it's kind of obvious that the industry was moving in that direction. I think that graphics over the next couple of years are going to be fundamentally a lot more realistic, and I think it's going to be in subtle ways. A game like Control looks incredible. I'm not saying that Control looks bad, but it's still quite an early implementation of ray tracing. And I think that as developers become more accustomed to this, especially as the market itself grows, with, once again, the consoles having it, it means that this is going to become a lot more prevalent in games. And I'm really excited to see what the next generation's going to bring to the table. And lastly, I did a poll recently on Twitter. By the time you watch this, it may be kind of over with. And I put out quite a few polls on Twitter because, it's interesting getting feedback, and obviously polls are one of the easiest ways to do this. And I basically asked how much money people would be willing to shell out for a graphics card, the new generation, from either AMD or Nvidia. So it was like GPU agnostic or manufacturer agnostic. And it's quite interesting because still around 14% of people were willing to spend over $1,400, and 900 it was around 16%. So you're looking at around 30% of users who are willing to cough up $900-ish US dollars or more on a graphics card, with obviously the remaining percentage being the 400 and 600 tiers. I'm actually very excited to see what the hell we can actually get in terms of raw performance with the 3060 and 3070. But with that said, I did mention that there was a ton of Nvidia information. I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. The normal stuff. Like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.